Welcome to AuthAction channel. In this video, I'm going to show how to add MCP server authorization. So recently, Model Context Protocol launched the authorization guidelines. So how they're going to implement in AI-based agent flow. So here, this is the official page. They recently released on June 2025. So there are guidelines, and then how the LLM should act as a client, and then your MCP server acting as a resource server, and then there is authorization server. So here I'm going to use AuthAction as authorization server, and then I'm going to show one demo app as a MCP server as a resource server, and how this entire auth flow works using auth flow. So it needs dynamic client registration, and then this resource server will send this resource server unique identifier that you need to configure in your application. So in order to integrate this authorization flow. So for this demo, I'm going to use this model context protocol inspector. So this will act as a so this is a very recent change, this authorization model. Still it's not yet developed in the cloud desktop app. So I'm going to use MCP inspector to show this demo. Yeah, so let's get into this. First of all, I have one sample application, MCP server demo application. You can get that in so MCP server-auth-example. It will show how you need to integrate authorization in your MCP server, what are the steps, how you need to configure, how this works, this sample app, how this works. If you go into the code, you will see the readme file, and then it will explain everything. Inside that, I'm going to explain how this is developed. So there is a server.js file. This is using express.js. So this MCP server is like a HTTP based remote MCP server, but we are going to run it in our local machine. So you can also run it in your servers and so on. So this is going to use streamable HTTP in order to connect and send a response to the client. So this server file contains so these are the guidelines they provided. This well-known endpoint auth protected resource will need to return some JSON structure like this resource and authorization server, and then there is a auth authorization server endpoint. This will return your auth OpenID connect configuration JSON structure, so that you can get from your AuthAction tenant. So there is AuthAction tenant public URL that will give your auth2 configuration, auth2 OpenID configuration URLs and bunch of stuff. And then there is a middleware. We are going to use this your AuthAction tenant to get this JSON web keys, JWKs, JSON to in order to verify the signature of the token that is coming into the server. And then there is this MCP and MCP stream endpoint that to handle the MCP request. So there is a MCP handler file, basic stuff. It's not a very complex one. And then yeah, it's using some small simple tools. So I will show you how it does. What are the tools we are going to use, like simple one, like a text to echo back, and then get the current server of time, current server time, and perform some mathematical calculation. So these are all simple tools. You can also call your other server APIs from your MCP server, and then you can use your backend M2M authentication in the behind the scenes, and also use so the incoming tokens will have this user ID, user information that is coming into your MCP server. Based on that, you can make your machine to machine request in order to fetch the actual resources. For a simple demo purpose, I'm using some standalone small tools. That's that. And so now I'm going to start this application, and then I'm going to configure. First thing, so I'm going to clone. I already cloned this one, and then I'm going to use npm install. I already did this one, just want to make sure everything up to date. Okay, so now I'm going to configure my environment variable. So I have this environment variable in my local. So this is a port where this application going to run, and then this is the domain, and I'm running in my localhost, so I'm using localhost. So here we need to add AuthAction domain and AuthAction audience. So AuthAction is the auth provider. You can able to integrate authentication and authorization in your single page application or machine to machine application, and also for passkey authentication and so on. So here I have one tenant. Now I'm going to create an application. So these are all the basic default application that is created. Before that, I'm going to enable a dynamic client registration. This is needed for model context protocol to work. So the dynamic client registration is needed. So the first I need to going to enable this one for this tenant. So any client can able to register themselves as application in this tenant. So okay, so this one is specifically used this for used for this MCP server use case. In other use case, you need to be very cautious using in production environment. Okay, so apart from that, so now I'm going to use MCP server API. So I'm going to create an API identifier. Resource server. The API server is nothing but a resource server. So I'm going to create a resource server for the MCP application. So I'm going to call MCP server, and then it's going to run in localhost 3000, and then I'm going to create this MCP server, and then I need to use the domain. So I already configured different domain here, so I'm going to use the current tenant domain, and then identifier is correct 3000, and then there is again, and then there is dynamic clients tab. So even though we allowed the dynamic client registration, it doesn't mean that the client will not will have access to each and every resource or each and every backend application you have. It should not be allowed. So this dynamic client that is registered via this LLM flow or any other flow, that should only be that should be restricted for what are the resource they need to access. In this context, they only need to access the MCP server. So for that one, I created this API resource servers, and then I'm going to allow dynamic client access for this server, not entire backend resources I created in my tenant or entire backend application. So I'm going to only allow this MCP server where this dynamic client that is getting created via LLM going to access. So I'm going to enable this one. So say for example, it's not going to access any other backend application or any other API server. Once you enable that one, you can see that you need to also allow dynamic client connections. Like these dynamic clients are connecting to this MCP server, but it need to authenticate the user, right? So it will initiate the authentication flow, but it need to authenticate the user. So in AuthAction, so we have these connections. So user can able to log in via email, password, or GitHub or Google based on your use case. Similarly, for this dynamic clients, you need to configure in order to dynamic the dynamic client, in order to connect this connect to this MCP server, they need to authenticate via the specific connections, specific authentication. Just for demo purpose, I'm going to show like a simple email password and also Google. Okay, once this is done, and also we are configure the environment variable here, and then I'm going to start my application using npm start. Everything is fine, and then the server, it's on like nothing but a express.js server. Yeah, okay, I'm going to start the application using npm start. So the application is started. This authorization server URL is like this one, auth authorization server, and then auth protected resource endpoint is this one, and then there is a health checkpoint. It's a sample endpoint. Okay, so and then there are some MCP client. Now I'm going to use MCP inspector to connect this remote this MCP server running in via HTTP, streamable HTTP. So check authorization is working or not. So this is an MCP inspector. So I'm going to run this one in my local. Copy this one, and then I'm going to create another terminal, and then I'm using nspeak, running this command, and then it started. Open inspector with the token prefill. There is a URL that shows here. I'm going to copy this URL and then open my inspector here. So this is an inspector. Okay, now I'm going to connect this one. Once I hit the connect, it's obviously redirected to AuthAction hosted login page. Here it shows like a login via email option and login with Google option. So I'm going to sign up a new account here. Before that, if you go to the AuthAction dashboard, you can see that there is a front-end application created that is dynamic. It's called MCP inspector. So during this operation, it's automatically created this dynamic client with some certain parameters like a redirect, allow callback URL, and so on. So these are all dynamically configured, and now I'm going to sign up on account. Okay, I'm creating an account, and then it's asking the permission. MCP inspector application would like to access your account. So this is the consent page. So user will be shown this consent page. It's now before allowing the application. So once user allow the access, and then it will redirect back to the actual applications. So this MCP inspector, imagine as like a LLM tool, cloud desktop application or some other application. So in here it's like a MCP inspector. Now it's connected, and then user access token is user is authenticated, and then it got the access token, and then it shows list of tools that is available. So when I click this one, it shows like a list of tools that is available in this MCP server, and then I'm going to execute on tool, and then it shows the demo succeeded, and I'm going to also execute then tool. It works fine. So now user is authenticated, that's why they can able to access these tools that is available in the MCP server. So this is specific to this application, localhost 3000/MCP, and also this is using streamable HTTP, not only for this authorization flow only needed for streamable HTTP. So remote MCP servers need this authorization flow, and that is what we are using here. And then you can also play around with auth using here it will show what are the steps. So this is a step actually happened behind the scenes. So it did the metadata discovery, and then it did the dynamic client registration. So it got the client id and client id issued at information, and then it did the preparing authorization flow, and then it exchanges with the token. So it got the access token via exchanging the code. So using that access token to call this tool. So if the access tokens are present, then it's validated, getting validated in the backend, and then it is running tools, and then it's allowing to execute the tool execution and so on. Because we have this um, authorization middleware for MCP and also for MCP stream here. So this is using JWKS approach, verifying the signature of the token that is issued, and also it has a expected audience or expected issuer and so on. So for example here in this OAuth flow, it got some access token. I can also copy paste this access token and show JWT decoder, and then I'm going to copy paste this one, and then so what it presents. So this is the value. So this is the issuer, and then audience is like localhost 3000, that is what it configured, and also user endpoint as well. So that's why this application is allowing the verifying, authorizing the token, and then allowing to execute MCP or MCP stream. Yeah. So okay, yeah, thanks, happy coding.